What's going on, YouTube? Evan here with Cloud9 Aquariums. Today we're going to be talking just a little bit about planning your fish tank. Now really, there's a lot that goes into this, and you really don't want to just jump into it without planning it, so here we go. First thing you want to think about, and this is really important, what's the benefit of the tank to you? Why do you really want a fish tank? For me, one of my big things about fish is I really just like the relaxation of, chilling out, hanging out, looking at my fish. It's just kind of relaxing to come home after a day of work and just look at them, see how they're doing, see my plants are growing. It's just kind of peaceful and serene. But in the same way, it's an own little ecosystem, so it's interesting to watch. There's interactions between the fish. But really, what is it to you? Because if it's something, it's kind of like one of those whims. Of, I want a fish tank. They're so cool. You really gotta think about it, because this isn't just some hobby you can just jump into and throw some water in a bowl and call it a day. You really want to take your time. So that's why we're gonna go through a planning step. And talking about time, what kind of time do you have in your schedule? Do you have 5 minutes a week? Do you have a couple hours every day? Because it's gonna take some time. You're gonna need time to clean your fish tanks out, and you're really gonna need some time just to observe it. You can't just feed them and walk away. I mean, you could, but if you want to have a healthy tank, you really need to have time to observe it. Another thing that's really kind of important is what's the chemistry of the tap water that's coming out of your home. Whether or not you have city water or even spring water or some kind of well water. You really you should probably invest in just a little basic test kit, or even take it to just a little sample to one of your little aquarium stores, pet stores, because they can test it for you and just let you know what the pH is of your water when it comes out of the tap, whether you have high phosphates, things like that, nitrates. It's just good stuff to know, especially when you're going to pick out your plants and your fish, because everything has its own little generic range where it wants where it'll grow the best, do the best, be the most happy. So you want to make sure you actually have a tap water sufficient for what kind of things you want to grow. Now, speaking of growing plants, okay, I love plants. If you can see in my aquarium right here, I have it heavily planted, and I have a bunch more. You can kind of take a look over in that corner. I got everything going over there. I got some stuff up there, so that's just a little peek into what my world looks like. But seriously, what you have to think about, what kind of plants do you want? Do you want to just have plastic plants? Sure, they're easier. And in my next videos, I'm going to be talking a lot about what plants can really do for you, what live plants can do as opposed to just plastic plants. Next thing you want to think about is what kind of fish you're going to get. Do you want monster fish? Do you want small fish? All my videos are kind of based around freshwater tanks. That's what I'm into. So, do you want freshwater? Do you want saltwater? And that really also has to do with, the kind of budget you have. And that's really what you need to think about too, is what kind of money do you have in terms of what can you lay down right now, and how much do you need to save up to get the basic stuff that you need, just get things started. And then secondly is what kind of weekly or monthly budget do you have, because you're going to set aside some money just for your tanks, because it's not free. once you buy the equipment, it's not just gonna go away, and it's not gonna be $5 a year to take care of it. Once you get the basic equipment, it's not really that expensive, especially freshwater, and especially if you have a properly balanced tank, it's not going to be too bad. But you really need to look at your budget, and that is going to determine what kind of plants you can have, what size of tank you can have, what kind of fish you can have. It all just revolves. Another thing you really got to think about is what kind of space do you have in your home. If you just have a little corner, maybe you'll want a little smaller tank, because the placement of the tank in the house can really actually matter whether you want to take care of your tank or whether you actually get to enjoy it. You really just don't want to put it in a closet. It's not going to be enjoyable to anyone in your home. If it's just you living by yourself, you want to be able to put it somewhere where it's enjoyable. I have my fish tanks actually in my room, and I actually have them set up so I can just sit on my bed or sit in a chair and just watch them, because that's even if you're just reading a book, watching TV, it's still something where it's just I want to be able to look at them. I don't want to have to just stand there, check them out for 5 minutes, get uncomfortable, and leave. You know, it's something you really want to be able to enjoy because it's a great hobby. It's really fun. And so based on the size, the space of your house, you know, and the size of where you can put this tank, you know, that's really going to determine what size tank you can really have. Now for beginners, I know you all want to get the little cheap 10 gallons, 5 gallons, little beta bowls. Don't do it. Just don't do it. You know, when I actually jumped into my own, I started with a 10 gallon, and it was the most frustrating thing I've ever experienced, just because the size of your tank can actually really determine the balance of the water quality, and what you can put in it. And people think the bigger tanks are a lot more work, and yeah, sure, if you have a 3,000 gallon tank, it's going to be a little bit of work. But what happens is those small tanks, there's actually this balance that happens in the water that can really just fluctuate a lot in the smaller tanks. So I would recommend for a starter tank, nothing under 20, 30 gallons. You know, even a 40 gallon right here. This right here is actually a 40 gallon tank, and it really takes care of itself, and it's great. I really like the 40 to 30 gallon range, especially for a beginner tank. And that's one thing too you also need to think about is once you get up above, you know, even 55, 75 gallons, you really got to think about where you're putting this in your house in terms of whether or not your floor can support it. You know, every 10 gallons weighs almost 100 pounds. So you got to think about it. This is 400 pounds sitting right here. If you get a 100 gallon tank, that's 1,000 pounds. So you want to make sure you're putting it somewhere where when you fill it up, it's not just going to fall through the floor. It's not going to be pretty. It's a lot of water. And finally, I think the last thing you really got to think about before you go out and buying everything is equipment. You know, based on your budget and based on the size of your tank, what are you going to try to get into? For a freshwater tank, the basic equipment you need is lights, tank, stand, filter, heater. That's basically it. Sure, after that you can talk about air pumps and all sorts of little, you know, cleaning doodads and all that kind of stuff. But the basic stuff just to keep the tank running is what I just listed. And whether or not you need, you know, top of the line, bottom of the line, you know, I would just stay tuned to my videos because I'm gonna go through every single one of these steps individually and really just kind of guide you on what's good to spend your money on, what's, you know, way too expensive and don't even bother with. Because there's ways where there are little shortcuts. You know, everybody thinks, okay, if I want to grow these expensive plants, I need to buy this T5 lighting system that costs me $400. Okay, well, I'm going to show you right now. See those lights above there, right there? 35 bucks. And you know what I'm growing in there? I'm growing some stuff that people swear you can't grow without T5s. So, I'm going to show you all sorts of little tips and tricks that you're not going to have to spend a lot of money. You're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And, you know, you and your fish are going to be happy about this. So I really want to just encourage you, don't get into this if you haven't have it planned out. I mean, write it down, take your time, do your research, because otherwise you're going to get into it and you're going to quit within a month because it's going to be really frustrating when you start killing fish or, you know, you get algae everywhere and you just can't figure out what's going on. So stay tuned. You know, feel free to leave your comments or questions or any kind of suggestions you want me to talk about. Just leave them below. If you haven't already, subscribe. I'm going to have a lot of stuff just to follow up on these little sections, and then, you know, from there we're going to break off into setting up dirted tanks and, you know, all these DIY cheaper methods, and we're just going to have a lot of fun here. So I hope this episode brings you and your fish a little closer to Cloud 9, and stay tuned for a lot of fun.